Welcome to Allies or Enemies. I'm Jess.
And I am Shawn, and this is our top 100 favorite board games of all time, and we are just about there. This time, we're counting down the teens.
And this is our second to last video, and so I'm really excited to talk about these games. So I think let's just get right to it with my number 20. My number 20 is Marvel United, which is a very light cooperative game. And when we first got it, I wasn't too sure if I would like it. It's very like comic book style. It looks like it's geared towards kids with the chibis, and like on your turn you play a card and you just do the actions of that card and the previous card. So it seemed really simple. But we liked the base game so much that we got the bigger version for the X-Men Kickstarter. And that's when I really liked it because the villains are so different.
Mm-hmm.
The heroes do feel a little different, especially more with the X-Men than the base game. The base game, they felt pretty similar. But where it really differentiates itself is every time you play a new villain. It's just little changes, but each game feels so different. And we got so many with that Kickstarter version that we have played tons of times and have only played through the villains like once or twice each so far.
Yeah, we've got like 50 plays or something of Marvel United. It's crazy. And I don't think there's a villain between the X-Men and the Avengers stuff. I don't think there's anyone that we've played against like 3 times.
Yeah.
So that's how many villains there are. And you're right, they are so different. And there's those really interesting ones too, like ones like Mojo or Spiral, or there's just so many that all do weird little things. So you got to think about things just a little bit different. And it's nice because the bones of the game are so simple. So it is really nice that they were able to kind of play with that as much as they have.
And it seems really well balanced because for us, it typically comes down to like the last card, whether we win or lose. And we were looking at the stats the other day. I think we have a 75% win rate, which is a rate I really like for cooperative.
So, pretty good.
Well, it feels like it's a challenge, but it still feels like you've achieved something when you won, but you get to win most of the time. And that makes Marvel United my number 20.
My number 20 is Scythe. And Scythe has been a bit of like a roller coaster for us, I feel like. When we first got it, we loved it. I remember you were like, oh, we got to get the bigger map. We need that. And it was like, no, we'll never play this with 2. But you're like, oh, but it's so big. And we wanted to get like everything for Scythe. And then it kind of fell off for us a little bit because 2 isn't like the best way to play it. Then we got the big expansion that added the campaign and the Rise of Fenris. And we got really into that. And we've actually played through it like 3 times now. And then just lately, we've been starting to get back into it again. And it's like every time I just forget a little bit about how much I like it. And then something new happens or for some reason we pick it up again. And it's always like, oh yeah, this is great. Because it is such an interesting resource management game and how you do that little mini board that you have of your action selection and trying to always time it so you can do the top and the bottom of those actions to have the resources to do both actions. It's so interesting, and I think you like that it is not as fighty as it looks like it will be.
Yeah, because you don't actually really have to fight each other. If there are more players, you're definitely going to get in each other's way, and there will be a lot of combat. And that is part of it, because you do get the stars that you need to win the game. You can get those through combat, but you also don't have to. So I do like that. And with 2 players, we have a lot of room that we can kind of do our own thing. But the boards are really interesting because there's so many different ways of mixing and matching. Mm-hmm. So not everyone's board's the same. Everyone's is a little bit different. And when you add the expansions and things, you get like, I can't remember, like 8 different types of boards that all line up the top and bottom actions in slightly different ways, which makes a really big difference, particularly if you're switching the faction that you are. Because those factions also play so differently as well.
It is really interesting how all of those different things combine. But that is my number 20.
My number 19 is Caverna, which is my highest rated Uwe Rosenberg game.
Oh, spoiler, no more Uves.
It is my favorite though. And you are cave dwelling farmers. And I really like just the aspects of pretending to have a farm temporarily. I went to an agricultural university, so I knew a lot of people who grew up on
Mm.
farms, and I like it in theory, but I know how much work actually goes into running a farm. So I enjoy doing it for like an hour or two. That is great. One of my favorite parts of Caverna really is the animal breeding. There's so many great animal meeples, and just trying to get pairs of animals and control the size of their habitats, and the fact that you can have sheep as long as you have enough of the dogs to look after them. Oh, it's so much fun. No matter which one I'm playing, I'm always doing animal breeding. It may not be the winning
Hmm.
strategy, but it's the most fun strategy for me.
Yeah, you always have a ton of sheep, and you always have a cuddle room. And I hadn't thought about that before, about because I grew up in Alberta, and so there were farms everywhere as well. And I think I have the same kind of affinity towards the idea of farms, but I would never want to work on one in real life. So I wonder if it's the same thing for me. Why I like Uwe games, and I may not be done with my Uves yet.
And for Caverna as well, we got the Forgotten Folk expansion, and that adds some asymmetric characters, which are really fun to play as well. And that makes Caverna my number 19.
My number 19 is Orleans. And I love bag builders. I love the like putting my hand in a bag and the clackety feel. And we always do the thing where we get the coin capsules to put our things in. We've got that for quacks, and we had that originally for this, and then we got the upgraded ones, which are even better because they're smooth and they're so nice. And so I love the feel of just having my hand in there and pulling out a bunch of things and then figuring out what am I going to do with these, where am I going to put them. And this does it the best. I think this was, at least for me, this is the first one that I'd played, and it still hasn't been topped yet. It's so slick and such a simple system that you've got your board and you've got like 8 actions or whatever it is on your board. And they do pretty simple things. They just move you around this map, build a house, whatever it might be. Mostly get you more people that you're going to put in that bag and clack around. But within that simplicity, it's like beauty within that simplicity.
Yeah, there is something about just pulling things out of a bag that makes it way more exciting. And you know your odds a little bit, but
Mhm.
with just like for quacks, even if the odds are in your favor of pulling what you need to pull, there's still going to be times when you don't.
Oh, the odds are never in my favor.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And yet it's still fun. It feels better than when you roll a dice and don't get a
Oh,
result that you
yeah.
want. I think part of that is you can leave characters out on a spot. So you're like, oh, I don't have what I need this time, but I'll set myself up for next time. So that probably helps. But yeah, the randomization of like, ooh, who am I going to get this turn definitely makes it feel more fun.
Yeah, I don't think I've come across a bag building game that I haven't liked, but this is still my favorite of them, and it is my number 19.
My number 18 is Dune Imperium. And before the board game came out, we watched the old movie because the new movie hadn't been
Yes.
released yet.
Yep, the David Lynch one.
Yeah, and I read the Dune books for the first time, so I was hyped for it, and it lived up to it. They do such a good job of keeping it feel really tight because Dune is this world where resources are hard to come by. There's like background political intrigue that just causes these slight shifts in who might have power. And because for Dune Imperium, you're only going to 10 points to trigger the end of the game,
Mhm.
it feels like each point is a struggle. You really have to work towards those points, and that plays in nicely to the second part. 'Cause first it's worker placement, then it's the combat, and deciding like when you might want to go all in with your troops and work towards those battles, dependent on like is it going to get you that crucial 1 point you need, or when will you maybe hold back and save them for the next round, is really interesting.
Yeah, this is a great game. I really like this game, and you can see because this is Paul Denon who also did Clank, and you can see so much of kind of the DNA of Clank and the stuff that I assume he learned from Clank put into this very different system because Clank is very much kind of a like a game you can play with your family, like a real kind of gateway game that's fun and silly. And this is not silly. This feels very serious and filled with this hard intrigue. This is as serious as a game about spice mining and worm riding can get. And it is really interesting how those cards can combo together, especially because now we've got both of the expansions. and that feels like that is the full game of Dune. That is like Dune at like its best self.
Yeah, absolutely. It was the second expansion that we most recently got, and we are
Hmm.
glad. I think now on we'll probably always play with those two expansions. So Dune together with both expansions makes it my number 18.
My number 18 is Tapestry. And Tapestry is a bit of an interesting one because almost everything in my like top 20 or even top 50, I would probably recommend to pretty much everyone who plays board games. But Tapestry, I wouldn't necessarily because I think it is kind of an acquired taste, but it's a taste I have very much acquired. And the reason for that, there's a few things, and they're all big positives to me, but they may not be to everyone. I love that it's such an abstracted Civ game. I love a Civ game, but I do really like that this is just moving up these tracks, and it's not necessarily like a one-to-one connection, but that is also helping me to build these buildings. So I've got this little city over here, and I'm adding the tapestry cards, which are kind of the different eras of your civilization, and spending the resources, and just how all of that different stuff connects together feels really good for me, even if it's not like directly exactly a Civ game. The other thing that I really like is all of the different factions, and there are like, I don't even know, like 40 factions now between all of the boxes, and they play so differently, and they are definitely not perfectly balanced, and there's always balance changes going on, and I don't mind that at all. I played a lot of like Overwatch and Street Fighter and all these games that have the same sort of constantly changing balance. And I think it's fun to try and find the one that I can break a little bit, or even be the one that I know isn't very well. Be like the Dan from Street Fighter faction in Tapestry. And then if you win with it, you can really gloat about that win.
Yeah, it is interesting because we now record all of our plays of all of our games on Board Game Stats. But even before that, Tapestry was the only game that we were recording our scores.
Yeah.
And part of that was because we felt like we weren't necessarily playing against each other because we recognized some factions just felt a little bit weaker or whatever it might be, but we were just trying to achieve like our best score and compare for when I was this faction to when you were this faction. So we had all of these stats of all of these games just written down in a notebook, and now we are still maintaining that, like, just by putting them into the app and always trying to get higher and higher scores. And it's so motivating to, I think in the rule book even, it says like a score above 300 is very good.
Right, yeah, so we always gun for that.
So we always gun for it. Like the times that we achieve it, we're like, ooh, yeah, I did really well this time.
Yeah, it is interesting because then we can lose. We can just get like annihilated. But then I look back and go, oh, I actually got more with the Islanders than you did with the Islanders. So I kind of lost this game. Well, I definitely lost this game, but I kind of won the war in a way because I beat that other score. So it's really a game that it depends on how you look at it. This is just one I keep coming back and back and back to. And it is my 18.
My number 17 is Trails of Tucana. I love flipping rights and rolling rights, and this is one of my favorite ones. And it seems so simple because each turn, two cards are flipped, two different terrains. It might be the same terrain, and then you have to draw a line that connects between those terrains. And what you're trying to do is connect the cities on the outside or the animals in between. But it's just really calming to draw your lines, try and make your connections, and then it can lead to some really good combos. Like you could have everything set up where you don't have anything attached until this one thing seems to attach everything, and you get to add so many extra lines and keep going. And I said before in another video that I think I really like games that feel a little bit like bingo. And for Trails of Tucana, I'm always the announcer of like which terrains are connecting. And again, I just find it really satisfying to be the caller and then get a chance to draw it out.
And like bingo as well, there's all these weird little sayings that have kind of come up as we play it. Like every time you say sand to mountain, it's sand to mountain coming down the chimney every single time. And there's a whole bunch of those now that have come up, and that just makes it more fun. And I really like as well that, and we've had a few like this, where we always play 2 games because it's got 2 different maps, one on the front, one on the back. And once you've written on the front side, you just really, it's so hard not to just do it again.
Yeah, and you always feel like, oh, I bet I can do even better because you don't quite connect everything. So that pushes you to want to have that other game. And that makes Trails of Tucana my number 17.
My number 17 is Near and Far. And I generally am a fan of Ryan Lockett games. I love the art, the writing is surprisingly good, usually for board games, but this is my absolute favorite of everything that he's put out so far. I just think it does adventure games the way I want them to be done, where it's like 90% Euro mechanics and then just a little bit of dice rolling, but it doesn't feel like too much, and you feel like you have control, and especially with the Amber Mines expansion, which gives you friendlier dice, and it fixes kind of the one thing in the base game I didn't think was that interesting. But this is one that I've just wanted to go back and back to play through all of the different stories of the different characters, and I've never wanted to do that in another board game before, but it's really interesting. I think the best one we had was 2 characters that it specifically says don't play these 2 together. I don't remember which 2 they are, but ignore that. Play those 2 together. It's really, the stories really intertwine in this cool way, and I think it actually works best if you play those 2 together. I don't know who they are, but if you have the game, look at that and ignore the suggestion and just go against the rules because it's great.
Yeah, those 2 characters were really fun. And when we first started playing this game, it was one that the end definitely came suddenly, especially for you, because it is a bit of a race game where the end is triggered by the last tent that goes out.
She says especially for you because she always triggered the end.
Yes, exactly. And so I saw that and I would just race to put out all my tents. And you, I think, were building up towards it being a longer game. And now we're both aware that that is a key trigger. So you are keeping the pace up just as much as I am.
At first, I would get like upset. Like, what? Why would you do that? I was having fun. I wanted to do this. I wanted to see my story. And she'd be like, well, because I want to win. And so she would be racing towards and see like, this is how you win. But I do think the expansion holds that off a little bit too, which I like as well. Because, yeah, I want it to take more time, which is a really good sign in a game. And that is my 17.
My number 16 is Pandemic Legacy, and I am grouping all of the Pandemic Legacies all together. And this was the season 1 was the first Legacy game we played. And I remember us being so on the fence about spending this money for being able to only play through a game once. But it was such a fun experience that after that, we were looking for what other Legacy games we could play. Because you get at least 12 games out of it for the 12 months.
I think we got 15 in our first one, yeah.
Yeah, and more if you lose and you have to replay. And it got to the point that I almost wanted to lose to be able to still like have more games left. And so we played season 1, we played season 2, then we played season 0. And I enjoyed them all with probably one my favorite, but 0's up there as well. And I think it was in my top 10, but because we haven't played a Pandemic Legacy this past year, it's fallen out of it. And I think that is part of the tricky with Legacy games, is the memory of it will like fade a little bit each year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's kind of funny now to think that when we first got it, we had held off because I thought, 12 plays. I don't want to spend that for 12 plays. And then we got it as a present and we loved it. But now I look, because we log all of our gameplays, and there's not a lot of games that we play like 15 times. Like there's not a ton of stuff. And so you realize actually 15 plays out of this game ends up equaling like $3 a play or whatever. Like that's a pretty solid return compared to so much else. And every game felt like it mattered.
Yeah, it felt like an occasion because that was the only time really that you were getting to play that game. And so it definitely made it worth it. And that makes Pandemic Legacy my number 16.
My number 16 is Parade. And Parade it's just this simple card game that I love. I have really grown to like. I didn't even think I liked card games like 5 years ago. I thought, it's not for me. I always want to have a board. And then it's that kind of been torn down a little by little until now I'm to the point where I'm like, I think maybe I prefer card games. I just have gone back to liking these simple card games, and this is for me the best one of all of the simple card games. And all it is you lay out, you've got a row of characters and they're Alice in Wonderland and they're in a parade, and you've got to make sure they're all facing the same way. We've played with monsters who will just turn them around, and they'll do it on purpose too. It's, you know who you are. But all it is you've got this parade of cards, and then each time you put out a card and it's got a number on it. So if it's like a 9, you ignore the 9 cards in front of it, and then you take any of the cards that are lower or the same color. And so it's just this really simple system, and it is so interesting, like watching people around the table and seeing how many numbers people have, and then you're holding them and you're really serious, and it's like this kind of pokery game, but it's funny because it's a pokery game about Alice in Wonderland and like putting these people in a parade. And I really like that juxtaposition of people like seriously holding the cards near their face. I feel like I should have like a hood up and sunglasses on, and then I'm just staring at like a bunch of the Cheshire Cat and like dodos in a row. I really like that.
Yeah, because the tension definitely rises every time that parade line gets longer and longer. And then when somebody adds a character, that means they have to take like 4 or 5 cards. There's almost like this release of the tension. Everyone's like, whew, at least now I can only take 1 or even none at all. And it works great at all player counts, because I really like playing just 2 players. But we've played, I think, like up to 5, and that's also worked really well. So I think it translates across the player counts quite well.
But Parade is my 16.
My number 15 is Planet Unknown. And I love tile placement games, and this is a great tile placement track climbing game. The best thing about it is definitely the Lazy Susan, where all of the tiles go. And it's so genius. I haven't seen that in another game before. But what it means is on your turn, you get to select one of the tiles, and then everybody has to take a tile that's in front of them. So it's completely simultaneous. So everyone is playing at the same time, then it goes to the next person to pick which one they want, and then you have to take one. And so I just like, there's no downtime. Most tiles feel rewarding. At 2 players, you can definitely set it up so that the other player is taking something they don't want. At more players, you're just going to be gunning for primarily what you want. But it works well, again, across all player counts because there's no added extra time.
Yeah, I love the just complete lack of downtime. And that is really because of that Lazy Susan. Like, I feel like that is doing so much work that I would just call it a Susan. But it's always like you're always engaged because you're always grabbing something and you're always putting it out, and then you're moving up those tracks, and the tracks are so continuously rewarding, and there's just such simple little bonuses, and then the asymmetry too, and we love that asymmetry.
Oh, and again, it's just fun to explore them, and every time we play, we ask like, which one have I been the least, and then you pick that corporation, you pick that planet, and that leads to us playing a lot of Planet Unknown in this past year, and that makes Planet Unknown my number 15.
My number 15 is Carcassonne. I am going old school, and I feel like people forget how good Carcassonne is. I feel like people have gotten complacent with the awesomeness of Carcassonne because we've all played it so many times, but I still just really appreciate the simplicity of Carcassonne. And partly this is because this was really the first game that brought me into what I would call modern gaming. Like, this is the first kind of big one for me. And I loved it right away. I remember playing this with some friends out at a pub or whatever, and then going home and telling people like, I played this game, this like crazy game that was like German and it didn't have any dice, but you could do these cool things, and it blew my mind the first time I played it. And it doesn't blow my mind as much now, obviously, but it's such a sleek system. It's so fun to build that map. It's so like amazingly mean, and more than any others, more than Ticket to Ride or Dominion or Catan or any of the ones that kind of brought me in at the start of my board gaming journey. This one has just kept with me all the way through and just has really not lost its luster for me.
Yeah, I think this is the highest in your list it's ever been,
Yeah, it's gone up somehow.
which is interesting. I think part of that is we have exclusively really played this recently at two players, and I feel like we're a really good match. I think if one person had played like a lot more than the other and just destroyed the other person, it wouldn't feel as good, obviously. But because we're so competitive and we have played now so many times together, I think that matchup almost makes it feel like an abstract strategy a little bit of like, oh, what am I opening up, or how can I close you off in this way, and it pairs really nicely with the two of us.
Yeah, and I think it's like knowing that like Jess really wants big farms. I know she is looking for those farms at all times. And I know if I give her any sort of in, she's stealing my castle. She is a terrible castle thief. And so we understand how each other plays. Yeah, and that does make it even more fun. And this is my 15.
My number 14 is Anachrony. And in Anachrony, you're playing different factions. Again, asymmetry. I think we're just going to see a lot of asymmetric games
Yeah, we
in
like
our top 20.
asymmetry.
Yeah, anytime there is, it kind of knocks it up for us. So you're these different factions, and you're in a post apocalyptic world, and then you're trying to get ready for an oncoming another disaster that means you have to
Yeah, you're
evacuate the planet.
between apocalypses.
Yeah, exactly. But what makes it really interesting is it's a worker placement game, but there are two different places you can put your workers. So you're building out your own board and adding tiles to it throughout the game, but you also still need to send your people out to the main board to be able to collect resources and build things and do all kinds of stuff. And the best part about that is very early on, we got the upgraded miniatures.
Yeah, you need the miniatures for this game.
And it makes such a difference because you can slide the characters so nicely into the miniatures and then like move them onto the planet. And because it's a big resource to be able to do that, it really feels worth it of having this big chunky miniature that's going out.
Yeah, we're always saying just get the retail. It doesn't matter. You don't need the things, but this is really the exception because oh, how satisfying it is to slide those workers into into that mech. It's terrific. And this is one where we've got a ton of expansions for it as well, and they all really let you play it in different ways, and they're mix and match. But this, even just, you don't really need anything really beyond just the base game because there's so much within there, so much variety between the expansions, two sides of the boards, all the different stuff you can do.
Yeah, I think this fell a little bit down my list because I got a little bit overwhelmed by how many choices the expansions presented us with. That when it came to setting up and deciding which one we wanted to play with, I felt like we weren't playing it as often, but it's still a great game and I still really like the different expansions and I'm glad we have them. And it makes Anachrony my number 14.
My number 14 is another one that maybe has too many choices now, but it is Great Western Trail. And Great Western Trail now has 2 editions of the base game, plus 2 more different versions of it. And I haven't played New Zealand yet. I've got a feeling that that's going to be my favorite of the bunch. But for now, I'm kind of torn. I think I'm going to say Argentina. But if you ask me in an hour, I might say original base game. Although always original base game with the expansion as well, because I do think that adds a little bit. But regardless of which way you're playing, I love the theme. First of all, there are not enough cowboy games out there. And I love the different ways you can play, the different avenues. And the reason I think I'm picking Argentina is it does kind of buff some of those other paths. In the original one, you just load up on cows. But in Argentina, you can do all the different stuff. You can have a building strategy and really have that be a good strategy, or even more so, you can have an engineer strategy because building the trains is a lot better. It helps you get these shortcuts. It just does more stuff, I think. And adding the farmers as well, add a nice mix to it as well, a nice little extra bit. And the dropping off the cows is more interesting too. Just everything about it, I think, takes what was in the base game, which I already love, and just adds a little something to it that I don't know if it's always better, but it's different, and I've enjoyed that difference.
And the meeples come with hats. So
Oh yeah, that is true. So Argentina is 100% better because hats.
yeah, exactly. I think for me, my favorite strategy, even if it wasn't the best one, would have been getting the cows. I just love picking up the cows
Hmm.
and selling them. And so I think that's why I still really like the base game, but I recognize it does always seem like the stronger strategy. But when we play Argentina, I have enjoyed like getting a lot of engineers, but it's just not as much fun as having a whole mix of cows and then being able to get to the end and get like lots of coins for the amount you're selling.
Yeah, and Jess always plays as well that when she's sending off the cows, she's sending them on a cow vacation to different cities, which is obviously what you're doing,
Yeah.
right? It's just like, oh, my cows would love to go visit their friends in San Francisco. So that is the way that we play it. So now these cows are traveling to Europe, they're going to Liverpool, seeing the Beatles. Cows, famously big fans of the Beatles. And that is my 14.
My number 13 is Dwellings of Eldervale. And in Dwellings of Eldervale, you are different factions. So, again, a lot of asymmetry between the factions, and there are a lot to choose from. And you are putting them into this fantasy world. So, you're sending them out into explore the lands and collect resources. But what I really like about it is it's also has a really nicely integrated like tableau building system because you're purchasing cards and those cards go out and they'll give you maybe an ongoing power or most likely there'll be a spot that when you bring your workers back you can put them on your cards to get more stuff. And so many games the bringing back workers feels like a wasted action that I really like that engine that you're building for that rest action to make that a really strong action. And then of course the best thing is the meeples are turning into dwellings by adding a rooftop hat, which I think tops the hats in Great Western Trail Argentina.
Yeah, turning into an actual house is pretty awesome. Although, if you put on a cowboy hat, you do become a cowboy. It's magic. It's like Harriet's Magic Hats. It works, and no one's going to know that reference. It's a Canadian kid show from the 80s. If you don't know it, watch it. It was amazing. But yeah, I really liked Dwellings of Eldervale. And I've said before that this is one I didn't expect to like as much as I did, but I really do like it. And I think that card system, the card tableau, is to me the most interesting part. Like I don't know of another game that has a more interesting taking back your workers action. And that's really cool that you've got half this area control and then half just a very very Euro-y card tableau game.
Yeah, it does a really nice mishmash, I think, of the two, where it does feel like a dungeon crawler, but with really integrated, like, Euro systems that work really well.
But still giant cool monsters.
Yeah, huge monsters. Although I am glad that we didn't get the highest version
Right, with the
with
sound
the
base.
sounds.
I'm curious to hear them though.
I think I want to see someone playing it with the
Yeah.
sounds because I don't think I would like it, but people seem to really enjoy the noises as you get towards those monsters. And Dwellings of Eldervale is my number 13.
My number 13 is Final Girl. And there is no game that more surprises me that I liked it than Final Girl. Because I should not like this game. This is a solo only game. We almost always play together. I've been playing more solo in the last year, but it's pretty rare. And this is totally a dice chucker. This is so much, everything is random. This is chucking dice. This is flipping cards that have huge swings. Everything about it is hugely swingy. But I love it. I don't know of another game that has a more interesting emergent story than Final Girl. And part of that love is that I am obsessed with horror movies, especially 1980s cheesy slasher movies, Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween, Friday the 13th. I love that stuff. And this does that so well. This is like a love letter to all of that stuff. And I love that they've got, I don't even know how they get away with it because it is very thinly veiled. But they've got the most thinly veiled Freddy Krueger and Jason and then in the newer ones, Aliens and The Thing, and just so many like movies that I love that I get a chance to play within this system. And even with all the randomness is kind of part of the fun, the craziness of doing it, and that it's kind of out of my hands. And I'm watching this thing as Freddy is slowly getting rid of all the people in their houses, and I'm knocking on doors frantically to be like, "Let me in, I'll help you." It's oh, it's terrific. I really feel the story.
And it is entirely because of the theme, because
Hmm.
this is what I like about a lot of the typical dungeon crawlers is I do feel that emergent narrative with like the misses and the hits and the dice rolls, but you do not. You just don't like the randomness of the dice. So it was really surprising that you like this one, and it is entirely because it taps in to your love of horror films.
Yeah, no, I am. I'm totally okay with it because I've watched hundreds and hundreds of terrible horror movies, and the worse the better. I love them. So it really taps into that, like, from childhood and continued to now, love of that genre, and oh, it does it so well, and that they're in little VHS tapes. I told myself I'm only gonna get one of these. I just need two. I just need Jason and Freddy. I'm never gonna need another one. And now all of the available boxes later, and I'm looking at season 3 already. And we play it co-op too sometimes as well, because there's no reason not to. Just when one of our rolling's going cold, the other one picks up on the dice, and I think that works fine as well. And that is my 13.
My number 12 is Between Two Castles of Mad King Ludwig. And this is a game that we often pull out when we're not too sure what to play. This is one, we say it all the time about a few games, but this is definitely one of the go-tos. And it's a game I think I could play every day.
Mm-hmm.
I just love castles. Shawn proposed to me at a castle, and so you're building a castle, and all of the rooms are individual. And so it could eat when you are building it, you're really just looking at the colors and the symbols, and you're kind of placing it just based on that. But what I make us do is at the end of every game, when we're scoring it, I make us describe our castles. I mean, scoring can be a bit of a pain as you add it all up, but we make it really fun because we'll go through and like name all the rooms and be like, oh, weird that you have this one room next to like the pit. That doesn't seem very good. And I love building this individual room silly castle.
Yeah, it's funny because a lot of people complain about the scoring part, and I totally get that. It is a bit of a pain. There's actually an app as well you can get that you can just scan the thing and it'll give you your score. But I think it is one of the most fun parts is this part that we've just made up that we have to do every time. And it really is fun to be like, oh yeah, so I got 4 points in that, and it's like this cat room, but that's next to the dog room and this other, and then we kind of picture the castle because they are really silly and they are really fun.
Yeah, and if you didn't hear it for the last time, it isn't even meant to be a two-player game. It's an extra variant, and we play where you draft two and you have to give one to your opponent. So you're trying to give them something bad and keep something good. And that's a brilliant way of being able to do a two-player drafting game.
Yeah, it's from Secrets and Swears, so we didn't make it up. We're not the brilliant
No.
people.
I think it works really well. And that makes Between Two Castles of Mad King Ludwig my number 12.
My number 12 is Ark Nova. And Ark Nova is obviously the enormous, like gigantic mega hit that it is for good reason. Ark Nova, one of the slams against it always is that it doesn't really do an original thing. It just takes all these things, but oh boy, it takes all those things and puts them together in such an interesting, unique way. How it mushes stuff I already like together. It takes the civilization, awesome like river card thing where the actions slide along as you use them and they get stronger and then they get weaker. And that is such a smart mechanic, but it's using it in this interesting, slightly different way. In the tableau building, there's so many routes because there's so many cards, and every game totally feels different. Games where I'm just building a whole bunch of aviaries, or I've got a bunch of reptile houses, or all I'm doing is giant mammals, or I've just got like a ton of big cats, or whatever it might be. It always feels just a little bit different, and it always feels tense. And I really like that how the rounds are just pushed organically as well as you play, and the goals, and just there's a good reason that this game is so popular.
Yeah, and it has an interesting endgame trigger that Rajas of the Ganges used, which is the crossing over of two separate markers. So one represents like your excitement or something, and the other one's conservation. So you're always trying to push both of those up until they cross over. So I think game length can vary greatly
Hmm.
because we're both pushed towards the end. But if people really just want to build up one for a long time and hold off and then work on the other one, it will be a much longer game, which I think works for some people.
And I'm really excited for we're going to Essen. So first of all, if you see us there, please say hi. We would love that. But I'm really excited to pick up the expansion for this as well, and just add even more avenues. And this is my number 12.
My number 11 is Welcome to, which is a flip and write game. And this was the first flip and write game we played, I think, other than like Yahtzee as a
Yeah.
kid. And we're like, oh, this is amazing. And that got us getting into so many more. And even still, though, I think this is still my favorite, even though it's the first one. And I love the genre so much. But I think part of it is how replayable it is. The base game is super replayable, but we've added in so many different options too, because we have the different packs with the different maps.
Yeah, the Christmas and Halloween
Yeah.
zombies.
And it all uses the same cards, which is great, and just changes the goals a little bit. And then also the Welcome to the Moon, which is 8 different maps that play in different ways as well.
Yeah, I think Welcome to does that thing that like Sudoku puzzles do or stuff like that, where it just taps into that part of your brain that desperately wants to solve this puzzle. Just humans want to put numbers in order. We really like to do it. I feel like you could weaponize the like how addictive it is to just put numbers in order. You could just like drop puzzles of this onto people and just leave some out, and they'll be like, oh, I want to fight, but I got to write in my 4, 5, 6 first. We just need to do it, and I can play Welcome to over and over and over, and I think it's because of that.
Yeah, it's something about putting numbers chronologically really does it. And for Welcome to, it's very rare actually that the end of the game is triggered because somebody has filled in all of the
Mhm.
houses. That when that happens, even if you don't win, you're like, oh, well, look, I got all my rows filled with all of my
Oh, it's so
houses.
satisfying.
And so altogether, that makes Welcome to my number 11.
My number 11 is Horrified. And this is the second horror movie themed game on my list because I especially love the Universal Monsters one. I like the American Monsters one fine. I'm really excited about the new one that is coming out, but Universal Monsters is, I don't see it getting topped for me just because I love these movies so much. And I love that they do such a good job of capturing the different monsters, the Frankensteins, or the Frankenstein monsters, and the creature from Black Lagoon, and Dracula, and all of that stuff, but also that all of the villagers are actual characters from the Universal movies, and it really is nice having that little bit of nostalgia in it, but also this is just a great system. It's such a like tight, fun system for being so rules light and does so much within that. And this, I think, is my favorite co-op game as well, and one that we just go back to and back to and back to, because you can ramp it up. If you play with 4 monsters, that is hard. I don't care who you are or how good you are at board games. 4 monsters is like, you got to play perfect to win that.
Yeah, I think we've won
One
once,
time, yeah.
and it was really great. And the interesting thing is the main mechanism is pick up and deliver because you're getting these different items and you're bringing them back, which isn't a mechanism either of us really like. But when you bring them back, something different happens for each of the different monsters. So for like Dracula, you get to smash a coffin. And just because there's that little bit extra of what it's doing, we're on board. Like it's okay that it's just grabbing stuff, bringing it back, because it's not just dropping it off. It's now like adding ingredients to make the potion, to get the wolf man, that it comes together.
Yeah, and I think because we like the movies as well, like we can see that within it as well. Like we can see that, we're solving the mummy's curse, or we're giving Dracula no place to hide again, or we're just bringing the monsters together so they can fall in love. All of the, like, we can see all of it within the films, and I love it when the theme of a game influences the mechanics in a way that just makes the gameplay so intuitive. Like, I feel like you could hand this to somebody who really liked these movies, and they could pretty much play it without a rule book. because it just plays the way you hope it will play. And that is my number 11. And that is it. That is counting down from 20 to 11, which means the next number is number 10. And the next video is counting down to number 1.
And we haven't seen each other's list. So based on what you've said so far, I think I could probably work out what would be left and on your top 10, but I'm not too sure what the order would be.
Yeah, I'm going to, before we do the last one, write down what I think your top 10 is and see how well it matches just by like elimination. But I've got a feeling there's gonna be something in there that surprises me a bit. I don't know. It really is interesting not seeing them beforehand this time.
Yeah, we'll make guesses about each other's lists and see how close we are. But thank you so much for watching. Please let us know if you played any of the games that we talked about. And as usual, please like, subscribe, and hopefully we'll see you next time for another game.